Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And you know, friends, there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, believe it or not, but there was a time when you could say that you were proud to be an American. You know, there was a time when you didn't feel ashamed of being an American. And I was going to say that I'm sorry if that offends anybody out there, but I'm not. Actually, if you're offended by that statement, it means that you have insulated yourself so completely in propaganda and cultism that you haven't looked outside. You know, you haven't checked the news rationally. I mean, just this past weekend, at the time of recording, the shit coming out of the people supposedly supposed to be in charge of this place. Yeah. At one time, I could say I was proud to be an American, and I hope to one day be able to say that again. And I don't think we really understand what we've lost by not being able to say we're proud to be an American, because despite all of its problems, and make no mistake, they are numerous, America at its peak, America in its prime, America at its most America, was something you could be proud of, an idea, a symbol. Maybe not always in execution, but the concept of what it stood for. It was easy to take pride in that, because yes, we've done some terrible things, but we've also done some great things. And our country is built on the legacy of amazing men and women who, you know, did things and took chances and fought the good fight, and, you know, just legends. But the problem with legends is that the further into the past they go, and the further into the realm of history they go, they start to develop myths and auras around them, and we tend to stop thinking of them as human. They're mythical figures, things that we could only hope to aspire to. And yes, they did amazing things, and yes, you know, they set things up in such a way that ideally everybody could work to their full potential. But the thing you always have to remember is that they were human. You know, one of my favorite musicals is 1776, about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And one of the reasons I love that show is because one of its most important themes is that the founding fathers, they weren't gods. Ben Franklin has a line in there where he says, we're not demigods, we're men. We're trying to start a country against greater odds than a more generous God would have allowed. Meaning that they were just human beings making the best choices they could with the information they had available, the morality of the time, the ethics and everything of which they were raised. And that to expect them to be more than that is just setting yourself up for failure. And sometimes, especially when we are concerned with our greatest moments, the historical moments that we feel truly define us, it's easy to forget that the people responsible for that were, again, just people, just human beings, and they were making the very best choices they could with the information that they had at the time. And I go through this long intro because I think that is one of the primary themes and one of the most important elements of this movie, of Pressure. Because this is a movie that is intent on letting us know that some of our biggest moments and some of our most defining historical deeds, and some of the men and women responsible for those were just people, and how stressful that could be. And it asks you to kind of put yourself in the place of the folks at that time and say, what would you do? So I really appreciate that. It's one of the things I really appreciate about this movie. Before we get into it, I always feel weird when I'm talking about historical movies or movies based on true events, because on the one hand, they are, they're history. You can look it up, you can find it. But on the other hand, it is part of the narrative of the story. So I'm never quite sure where the spoiler warning should go, or if I should put it up. So just for the sake of argument, just to cover my bases, I am going to put up the spoiler warning that we are going to talk about some of the decisions and some of the outcomes here. But again, they are fairly well known. But then again, you have to ask, are they? So at any rate, spoiler warning is up.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe say spoiler before you give away the end of a movie, okay?
Okay, so the movie Pressure, which is based on a play, which I'm very excited to read now, is about the days leading up to the invasion of Normandy, to D-Day. And General Eisenhower, as played by Brendan Fraser, is like the supreme commander of the Allied forces, and he is the guy who has to make the final decision about, do we go or do we not go? And he's got everything lined up, everything's ready to rock and roll, except for one thing. He wants to know about the weather. He wants a weather forecast. And so they call in Dr. Stagg, as played by Andrew Scott, who's like the best meteorologist in the world, supposedly, and he wants him to give him the forecast for Normandy. And the entire invasion rests on Stagg's discovery. So he is trying to do things his way. Meanwhile, one of the other meteorologists, whose name I can't quite remember, is saying, yeah, the weather's going to be great, the weather's going to be perfect. We can tell because we've looked at the history of the area, and it's always nice and always great. And Stagg is saying, no, we got to look at these numbers, there's these storms and all of this. And it's Eisenhower kind of being pulled in these two different directions, because every one of his staff, every other commander-in-chief of the Navy, of the ground forces, they're all sitting there going, we're going to go, we're all set. But he has this one dissenting voice who's saying, no, if you go, the weather is going to tear us apart and it's all going to go to shit. And so now he has to make this decision with 100 people saying yes and one person saying no on what he has to do. So this really is a movie about one of the most important weather forecasts in history. And one of the reasons I put the spoiler up, but also why I want to talk about it, is because I myself, it took me a little while to get into this movie because of my own ignorance of the situation. I always assumed that D-Day went ahead as planned. I didn't know that it was, spoiler alert, postponed. I didn't know that. So I went into this going, okay, so this is a movie that's trying to create all this drama about something we know happened and we know we won. So it's like, it's really going to have to work to, and it wasn't until it got to that point and I was like, oh shit, I was wrong. So right off the bat, I want to say that this is something I did like about this movie, is it did teach me something. You always got to be careful with movies based on a true story or that say that this story actually happened, because of course they're dramatized. Of course they are. Life doesn't follow a 3-act structure. But I think one of the best things you can say about a movie based on an actual event or based on a real person is that you really did learn something from the experience. And indeed I did. I did not know all of this. So right there is something I highly recommend about the movie that taught me something. And I'm glad about that.
But you know, I've learned something today. You see, the basis of all reasoning is the mind's awareness of itself. What we think, the external objects we perceive, are all like actors that come on and off stage. But our consciousness, the stage itself, is always present to us. Tits.
So, with this movie, and finding out that it's based on a play explains a lot. This movie is very theatrical, meaning that it's in several isolated locations. It's a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of, characters kind of butting heads. And so let's talk about this in just kind of chunks. So first of all, I really did enjoy the writing. I thought the writing and the directing was really, really well done, especially when you have to make something like finding the weather, getting the weather report dramatically interesting. You know, a lot of people badmouth the King's Speech. I love the King's Speech. And one of the things I love about it is that it's a movie that hinges its entire dramatic thrust on, will this guy be able to make a speech? You know, will this guy be able to talk? So I really enjoy that. I like that when a movie can get us to care about something that we take so very much for granted. I also like that it does give us a little bit of an insight into just what had to go into getting a weather report at that time. We take this for granted. Like, I could get on my phone right now and get a weather report for like the next month and have it be fairly accurate in most cases. Because we have all this technology that tells us about the weather. And back then, it was all very analog. I'm not going to say it was in its infancy, because I don't know about meteorology or like how long it actually has been around. But it certainly did not have the advantages that it has today. And trying to get an accurate weather reading with what they had to work with was next to impossible. He even says that. Stagg says that multiple times in the film. He says, "Are you certain?" He says, "No, I can't be certain. I cannot give you a 100% guarantee on this." And we see this even now. I say the weather could be fairly accurate, but the weather does what the weather wants to do. I'm from Alaska originally, and I can tell you, folks, that weather decides what it wants to do regardless of what you say it's going to do. So I appreciate that it spent some time on that. But this movie it lives or dies. A dramatic piece like this based on a play, it lives or dies by the performances. It lives or dies by the acting, because that is the primary source of drama. Now it has some pretty extensive battle scenes. It does have its more theatrical and more, cinematic elements, but a lot of it is just people talking and bouncing things off of each other. So how is the acting? And the answer is pretty damn good. The whole cast is great. I can't go through all of them. I'm just going to focus on our two leads. So Andrew Scott does a great job as Stagg. Andrew Scott, he's one of these guys that you probably know, because for a while in the early 2000s, he made his living playing like the slimy bad guy. He was Moriarty in the Sherlock show with Benedict Cumberbatch. He played a bad guy in Spectre, I think, that god-awful Bond movie. Recently, he played kind of not a bad guy, but one of these untrustworthy guys in that Cameron Diaz, Jamie Foxx action flick. So I like when he gets to play something that's not evil. Because it's kind of like for a while there, I knew Sean Bean more as playing villains than I knew him for playing heroes. And so when he would show up and would actually be playing a nice guy, I'd be like, whoa, what? You'd be waiting for him to do something terrible. Same thing here, but it was nice to see that he's getting the chance to play these other characters and playing them very well. The only thing I will say, and this is where reviewing a historical film has its pitfalls, because I don't know if I'm stomping on what The Real Man was like, and if so, I'm sorry. But they paint this character, his characterization, let's say that, with that kind of new stock character type, that Gregory House kind of, I'm smarter than everybody in the room, and I don't have to be nice, I don't have to be polite, I don't have to, because I know everything, I'm in charge, and if you don't like it, get over it. They paint him very much with that brush. I don't know if that's how the man was in real life. Maybe it was, and it's an accurate portrayal. I understand that they kind of do that dramatically because you have to have that reason why people are just hardwired not to listen to him. Whereas the other meteorologist is much more jovial and personable, and he's singing the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B, and everybody likes him, so of course everybody wants to side with him, and he's telling them everything that they want to hear. Meanwhile, this other guy who's a dick is telling you everything you don't. Of course, just be honest. Who are you going to listen to initially? So I get why they do that dramatically, but it does raise that question of, did you really think this was going to work? That you come in and you just immediately you paint a negative picture of yourself. You don't try to ingratiate yourself to anybody. You don't even bother with basic politeness, like showing up on time. You're just a blatant dick, and you expect people to listen to you. That's not how human beings work. You're making it harder for yourself. So again, I don't know if that's the person, but I do notice that is an archetype, especially in movies like this. I don't know how many people remember Imitation or Imagination, I can't remember the name of it. Again, with Benedict Cumberbatch, where he plays the guy who basically invents the computer to break the Nazi code, and he's the exact same kind of character, that aloof, rude, antisocial kind of character. So I noticed these archetypes. Maybe all these geniuses actually are like that. I don't know. But it is something that's like, I don't know. It threw me off a little bit. And that's not so much in his portrayal. It's in the way the character is, the purpose the character serves within the narrative. So, yeah. But of course, the person they're hanging all this on is Brendan Fraser as Eisenhower. And does Brendan Fraser do a good job? Yeah. Yeah, he does. I will say there are one or two times where it felt like he didn't quite know what to do with his arms, where he's standing and his arms are kind of like out to his sides like he's the Hulk. I don't know. I don't know, like, again, if that was an Eisenhower thing. But yeah, there were a couple times he looked a little uncomfortable in the costume or whatever. I don't know. And those were just minor moments that kind of threw me off. But regardless of that, those minor moments set aside, it's a great performance. I hate to say this sounds so terrible, because we all know the reasons Brendan Fraser kind of bowed out of Hollywood for a long time, and the unpleasant circumstances that led to that. And I'm not going to say that was a good thing, but I am going to say that maybe taking that break was one of the best things for his career. Because, as a 90s kid, we all knew Brendan Fraser. He was that great, good-looking, kind of Encino Man, doofy guy who came and did these kind of goofball comedies. It's not that he hadn't done drama. He did School Ties. But he was known as George of the Jungle, the guy from The Mummy, and all of that. And I think getting away from that for a period of time and then coming back with something like The Whale, so the opposite of everything he had been associated with prior, it really showed us, man, this guy can in fact act. And he once again, he does in fact act. Now again, I must confess my ignorance as to Eisenhower as a public figure. I bring this up because one of the things I liked about his performance, to my knowledge, is that he didn't seem like he was trying to put on a voice or a dialect or a certain inflection to make him seem more like the character. Way back in like one of the first years I did these, I reviewed a movie about Jackie Onassis that had Keira Knightley, I believe. And she was so focused on doing the voice and the accent that it just sounded ridiculous. It's like, just talk. Likewise, there's advertising that they're doing a movie about Jimmy Stewart. And I have a real hard time with it because all of the previews that just have the guy and he's on there doing his Jimmy Stewart impression. Oh my goodness, yeah. Oh, what am I gonna do here now? That's great for a Saturday Night Live sketch. But for a full-length movie, you just sound like you're doing a bad Saturday Night Live sketch. Just talk. We know who you're supposed to play. We know who you're supposed to be. You don't have to put on this fake dialect. And to my knowledge, Brendan Fraser doesn't. Brendan Fraser has a very specific cadence to his speech. And to my knowledge, he did not try to change that or adapt it. He just acted. He used his regular voice, and we all went, okay, we know who he's supposed to be, and it worked. And I also very much appreciate, this goes back to the writing, I like that this movie, at its core, is it humanizes Eisenhower by saying that he himself is traumatized by an incident that happened prior to the war. This is something else I didn't know about. Kind of a dry run, a dress rehearsal for D-Day called Exercise Tiger, which was a practice that they decided to use live ammunition for whatever reason. And because of something that got fucked up, one little mistake, all these people ended up dying. And he's haunted by that. He's haunted by the one mistake that he made that cost all these people their lives. And he knows that he's going to lose people. He knows that there's going to be heavy casualties, but he's trying to ensure the best possible outcome for the most possible people. And you can see that it makes sense why he would listen to this one voice saying no, don't go, but why he would also be angry about it. It's a tough kind of line to draw, especially, if many of us, thankfully, have never been in that situation where we have to make that kind of life or death call. And it does kind of put you right into that mindset of what would you do? What would your call be? And it's easy for a lot of the film, I thought I knew what the response was. And then when I found out I was wrong, I went, oh shit, I would have killed all those guys. Excuse me. So, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that it gives you that insight. Is it perfect? No, it's not. I think some of the other characters are kind of underdeveloped. I don't know if they have more stage time in the play. But, for instance, the other meteorologist whom, Stagg basically calls an idiot in front of everybody and then goes and asks him for his advice. It's like, you just said this guy, you called him an idiot in front of everybody. Why would you want to listen to him? Why now are you coming to him? So it kind of paints him as in a with one brush and then tries to correct it, but doesn't quite do as good a job as maybe it could have. So yeah, I feel some of the other characters were a little one-dimensional. And yeah, and again, I understand that they are written that way to serve a specific purpose in the narrative. Especially since it's definitely Eisenhower and Stagg's show. It's their movie. So I understand why all the other characters have to fit into a more pat kind of slot. But it makes it stand out when you have two really well-rounded characters played by two really great actors, and you have great actors in the rest of the cast, but their characters aren't as well-rounded. It stands out. So yeah, I had a little problem with that. But generally speaking, another thing it does before I wrap up, it really does a great job of painting the drama and the anxiety of being the commander of these fleets, and yet on the day you're in a tent 1,000 miles away listening to the reports. You know, you're not there. They do a really good landing at Normandy sequence, which I almost wish they hadn't. I almost wish that all we had known had been what they heard. I wish we kind of would have stayed there. But again, I don't know if it would have played as well. But that is also something you don't really take into consideration. Just that's, again, especially since you're relying on, you don't have real-time drone satellites, you know, all these things coming at you in real time to tell you what's going on. You got to rely just on somebody communicating over a radio, and who knows if there's a delay or whatever, and who knows if what they're seeing or reporting is accurate. So yeah, I appreciated that tension. So all in all, I think this movie has a couple flaws, but they're nothing insurmountable. And I do think that in the realm of historical dramas that I've seen, this one definitely is one of the best. It's one of the ones I wouldn't mind watching again. It's one that I wouldn't mind actually learning more about, which again is another thing I think that makes a good historical drama or based on a true story. If at the end of it I want to know more about these people and this situation, that's good. Anything that sparks an interest in learning more in our past, I think is a good thing. So yeah, I definitely think this one is worth a check out. I think that it will do its job very well for you. Even if you're not a huge fan of war movies, I think if you're a fan of drama and character interaction, then this one will work for you. So I enjoyed it. So to wrap up, let's talk about it. Let's talk final grade for Pressure. I'm going to give it a solid A-. I'm giving it an A-, and the A- comes from, again, the less developed, less three-dimensional characters and some of the minor questions I have regarding the characterizations of its main characters. But on the whole, I deeply appreciated it. I liked that it taught me something. I liked that it sparked curiosity in me. I liked the performances from our two main characters. And all in all, it is that film that reminds you that at one time you could be proud to be American and be proud of what we accomplished and what we did. That one time we did everything we could to fight Nazis as opposed to letting them march on the Capitol. You know, that's a humbling reminder, but one I think we do need. So, all right. So that's enough of me and my personal politics. Let's wrap this up. So thank you for coming along. Thanks for listening. I hope you're all doing well. And as always, Drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.